Welcome back. Now, today marks the 100th anniversary since the Afrikaans language was officially recognized in South Africa alongside the English language in 1925. Now, over the years, the language has faced many challenges and misconceptions along with that, but it has stood its ground and the test of time and evolved to become one of South Africa's 11 official languages. Now, to talk to us more about the history of the Afrikaans language and how it has evolved, we are joined virtually now by Tariq Mellet, an author, historian, and a councillor at the Council for the South African Heritage Resource Agency. And we're also joined by Professor Hennie van Coller, Emeritus Professor of Afrikaans at the University of the Free State. Gentlemen, good morning to both of you, and thank you so much for joining us here on Morning Live. Prof. van Coller, if I could start with you. The Afrikaans language officially recognized on this day, the 8th of May, 1925, but where did it all begin?
Well, that is a rather difficult question because a language doesn't fall out of the sky. Actually, the old view of Afrikaans as a spontaneous development from Dutch is not the current view. The current view is that Afrikaans actually is a sub-variety of Dutch and spoken by all the people, not in the confines of the castle, which was the administrative seat of the Dutch company, Indian company. Those included slaves, sailors, soldiers, farmers, actually everybody in the Cape. And that sub-variety was spoken amongst all these people. And then later, this variety was recognized as the official language Afrikaans. We must remember that initially in 1925, when Afrikaans was recognized, it didn't define Afrikaans and its varieties. It only said Afrikaans, but at that time it also included Dutch. So actually Dutch was also recognized in 1925, and the law later was amended, and it was only Afrikaans.
And Tariq, I want to bring you in here because I was reading something that you had written about Afrikaans and, its beginnings, its evolution over the years, and something that you penned earlier. Our history and heritage is poised between lies and truths, you say. This is something that you posted yesterday, and you speak of the celebrating a travesty of justice and dishonesty about the Afrikaans language and its centenary celebration today, or at least the centenary of it being adopted as an official language. So talk to us about your view on this language and, of course, what we are celebrating today.
Okay, so firstly, let me just say it's a very, very beautiful language. Although I'm English speaking, my father was Afrikaans speaking. I just didn't grow up with my father. Afrikaans is spoken by over 7 million people in South Africa. Of that 7 million, over 60% are not white people. And it's important to understand that. And even amongst white Afrikaans speakers, people who subscribe to the concept of a Afrikaner identity are about 30% of that 40%. So it's important to have that perspective. I find that the celebration of the centenary of of Afrikaans becoming an official state language in what then was a whites-only state, I find that divisive and politicizing of the Afrikaans language, which I don't think we need at this time in our history when we are trying to build bridges. There are many things about Afrikaans history that we can celebrate, and it certainly isn't a centenary. It goes back, 400 years. If we look at the earliest development of Afrikaans, it happens in that 50-year period between 1600 and 1652, when people from 5 European countries are coming around the Cape, over 1,000 ships, and they're interacting with the Khoi people. And we have two figures, Krotoa and Achomawa, who stand out as being linguists, early linguists. And we see that, the mix of Dutch and other European languages, of Portuguese, Malay, and also of Khoi, starts to happen in this sort of boiling pot at this particular time. And we can then move across, and we look at the first written Afrikaans in Jawi Arabic script in 1793. Again, a red letter day. The contribution of the African Asian enslaved and their many languages. Also, today we talk about Afrikaans and we talk about Afrikaans. In a sense, what happens in the period 1875 to 1925 or 1933, when the Bible is translated into Afrikaans, is we have a rigid codifying of the language. In other words, a straitjacket is put around it, whereas it is still growing, and it's still growing today. My caution is, I'm unhappy that we're celebrating the centenary of state recognition of Afrikaans in what was then a whites-only state. And that's not good for Afrikaans, and it's not good for us building bridges and celebrating something that is owned by a much larger group of people, diverse people, 7 million in the country, the fourth highest language spoken in South Africa. That's where I'm coming from.
And Professor Van Coller, if I can get back to you, feel free to respond to what Tariq raises there. But also the fact that Afrikaans is by and large viewed as very much a white language. But as Patrick rightly points out, the majority of Afrikaans speakers in South Africa are in fact not white. So how has this language evolved, and how has it kept pace with all of the other dialects and, as Patrick points out, like Afrikaans and everything else that's going on around it? How has it kept up with that, evolved, and embraced that to a greater or lesser extent?
Well, let me first say that I do agree with many of the standpoints of my fellow guest, Tariq here, and I understand his feeling, but one must say that official recognition of any language is an important date, because without the official recognition, a language is not afforded certain rights and certain, let's say, financial benefits, because without the official status granted to Afrikaans, Afrikaans would not be developed as an academic language today. It would not have a dictionary. It would not have several standardizing publications like grammar publications. It would not have a standard variety. And a standardized variety is also very important for any language, whether it's Afrikaans or English or Dutch or German or whatever, because you must write in a certain language in the magazines, in newspapers. You've got to use that, ideally speaking, on the television, etc. Without that standardized variety, you cannot teach at the university because there won't be any terminology, etc. So I think one should not confuse certain issues here. The first one is, what is Afrikaans, and what is the history of Afrikaans, and what should be seen as Afrikaans and all the people who contributed to the language. And the other one is the importance of the official recognition of Afrikaans. And I do think that is quite important, not only for Afrikaans, but also for English in South Africa. And that is the case in every country that I know of, that they usually are very jealous about their official language, and therefore there are many language conflicts in many parts of the globe. So I think let's talk about the official version of Afrikaans, or the official recognition. And then your second question. Well, I think there's been a lot of developments in the past few years. We change our, and I mean we, the academics, change our view as to the origins of Afrikaans quite dramatically, and as a and therefore we also teach certain varieties in our courses of literature. If you look at the curricula at universities in South Africa, you will see Cape or Kaaps included, poetry in Kaaps or in standard and other varieties. So we're doing a lot of it, and even the South African Academy of Arts and Sciences are including words from all the varieties and are busy with the spelling of these words. So I think there's been a large change.
And unfortunately, we're running out of time. But, you know, there was, of course, also this issue around the language. And I think we're going to need more time at a different stage to get into this. But reconciling the language's cultural achievements with the historical association with apartheid and all of that, Tariq, in a minute, if you could just briefly touch on that, because as I say, we'll need more time to have a more discursive discussion.
Look, I believe that official recognition is important. What happened in 1925 was official exclusion of all African languages, and Afrikaans did that at the expense of other languages. Today, when we have all our languages officially recognized, we've made progress, because at UWC today we have a great project of a trilingual dictionary. Afrikaans, Afrikaans, and English. Afrikaans was totally suppressed by that official approach. It was iced out. Many words were purged from Afrikaans by white nationalism, and therefore it was a travesty that happened in 1925. I think we want to get over the apartheid era, and we want to get over the colonial era and build unity in South Africa. And we've got to be sensitive to what that actually means.
Gentlemen, I wish we had more time. Unfortunately, we don't. So we're going to have to leave it there for this morning. But, Leanne, I think we need a little bit more on this. But thank you so much to our guest this morning, Tariq Mellet, author, historian and councillor at the Council for the South African Heritage Resources Agency, and Professor Hennie van Coller, Emeritus Professor of Afrikaans at the University of the Free State. And yeah,
Goodbye.
Interesting.
It is. Bye-bye.